Hey guys, this is the Party Size M&M. And what makes this different from its little brother, the M&M, are two main things. One, it's a bit longer, it's about an inch longer, and that's because it has 7 different micro articulations that go throughout the fly itself. Number two is that it's two-tone. Across the top, it's got olive, and across the belly, it's got white. And as you know, if you follow my channel, I love to fish for wild, finicky, brown and rainbow trout. And the way I look at it is if you can trick them, you can trick any fish that swims. And this fly, as you can see from the video here, has produced incredibly well. I'm able to fish it on a 5 weight, which makes it super fun for me, easy to cast, easy to manipulate, and to watch the brown and the bows come up and explode on it in shallow, clear water is just absolutely incredible. The fly swims and looks just like a minnow, and when it's wet, oh my God, amazing. So let's take a look at the materials. It has 3 different length shanks in it, 6, 8, and 10. And then across the top, it's a blend of ice dub and calabatus in olive brown. And across the bottom, it's also ice dub in UV pearl. On the front, basically what I have is a B10S size number 6, one of my favorite hooks. Buried in there is a 5/32 silver tungsten bead, and then across the top, you see laser dub in olive and white. So, without further ado, let's get tying. All right, so we're going to start by making the back with just a little material prep. I'm using 2 different colors. If you haven't seen ice dub calabatus before, it's basically a green. When you hold it up to the light and look through it, you'll see it's a light green. And then I've got ice dub in olive brown here. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 equal amounts and then blend it together. All right, ice dub, UV pearl, 7 shanks, 7 sections. You want to make them progressively larger. This is going to help with the taper and taper development, just like we did with the back. Next, taking the back, ice dub calabatus, split into 7 sections. All right, so tying on these 6mm and 8mm shanks can be a real pain. And here's a couple tricks just to make life easier for you. One, once you put it in the vise, make sure the short end is up. As you tighten it, what you'll see is that it'll open up or at least move to the side, which makes it easy for you to put another shank on top and to basically secure it into position. As you're laying your thread down, just put a quick base, which is nice. Leave your thread sitting in the middle. Grab your bottom material first, make sure your tips are aligned, and then set it right on top, center. And now put the thread between your fingers, pull down 1, 2, 3 loose wraps. Now because you left it long, you can basically pull it down to the bottom of the shank, tighten, and then come forward. As you move forward, just make sure the material stays down on the bottom. There you go. It saves you a lot of pain and agony as you're going through. The top, we're going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm just going to align the tips. I'm going to come back to the center, put it right on top, come in, I'm going to do 3 loose wraps. There's 3. Make sure it's still sitting on top. I'm going to come forward. As you come forward, making sure that you don't go all the way to the eye itself, leave yourself a little bit of room, and then go all the way to the back of the shank itself, so you know where to stop with the flashaboo. With the flashaboo, typically it'll come through and you can see you got multiple strands there. Wet them, and all of a sudden it's all together. It makes it much easier to manage and to handle. Again, your thread is in the center, lay it down on the shank itself, come forward, lock it into position. Now go all the way to the back of the shank, come forward again, and now wrap forward. And this is the lateral line, right? So you want this to look good. Get full coverage, up and back, then wrap right back. Flip it, wet it, again, makes it easy to store. And next we're gonna come forward. So I'm gonna come all the way forward, pull my materials up. Before I pull my materials, I'm gonna measure. So if it's a tail shank, you wanna leave everything long. If it's a shank that's connecting to another, off the back, you wanna do half the length of the shank behind you. So you'd go back, measure, and then clip. And then as far as the front, you want it to be a length and a half of the shank. So here's a length, and then here's about a half. It doesn't have to be perfect because we'll fix the taper at the end, but it makes life easier when you're pulling materials back and trying to get everything situated into place. So pull it back. Again, your thread is up front. Do one wrap, make sure your materials look good. 2 wraps, pull a little bit tighter. 3 wraps. That's all you need. Grab your Zap-A-Gap. I'm gonna hit a 1/4 inch of it and then wrap and be done. So there's a 1/4 inch. Notice I'm keeping tension on my thread. 1, 2, 3. That's great. And whenever I'm using super glue, I always grab a razor blade to cut it off. 6mm shanks made easy. All right, let's get tying. We're gonna start with a fish skull, 6mm. All right, so I decided to high speed through these shanks because at the beginning, right, we walk through material prep and also how to tie the perfect shank. And regardless of whether it's a 6, 8, or 10mm shank, it's exactly the same process to go through and to measure. So double check that out if you're unsure. The one thing that I want to make sure that you remember, tail section, always keep long. If you tie it short, it's just going to look weird, so keep it long. We'll trim it at the end. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the importance of mono thread. It's really nice because it allows you to tie over your materials, keep the exact same coloration, which is cool. But most importantly, it provides protection for the flash boom mirage. So as you're tying back and tying over it, it ensures that when teeth get on it, because they will, brown trout, rainbows, smallmouth, walleye, right? They all have teeth. And by tying back over with mono, you keep the color and you protect your fly. All right, so next we're using a 8mm micro shank. Same thing, make sure you got your dark on top. So these 8mm, exactly the same as the 6. So we have 3 6mm, right, including the tail section. Now we've got the 2 8mm, and just take your time, use your different piles. Double check and verify that your fly doesn't look crazy bushy. If you take a look at mine itself, you can see there's translucency between the material, and if you're having challenges, pulling things back or tying things into position, just double check and pull some material out. I'd rather have a fly that has less material than more. Again, you'll always hear me talk about translucency, because at the end you want light to be able to bleed through your fly so that it gives the illusion, just like a regular minnow, of translucency, where you can physically see through it. Okay, next section, 10mm shank. Believe it or not, you can fit it through at 8mm pretty nicely there. Just gonna hold it down with my hair clip. For the size 10 shanks, everything is exactly the same. Just remember to use your measurements, measure half the distance to the shank in the back and a length and a half up front. And of course, continue to use your progressively larger material piles, and it'll just create that taper automatically for you. The other item, you see me, I go through, and after tying each fly, I grab my Velcro and just go over the back of it. What that does is it pulls materials, and it just gives me assurance that I've got my olive on top, the white's on the bottom, and it just gives me a minute to reflect and make sure that everything is in place and as it should be. And the reason why that's important is because if you make a mistake, you can fix it on that shank as opposed to tying the whole fly. All right, so let's get going on the front hook Gamakatsu B10S in size number 6. And you'll see I've got a silver tungsten bead that's in 5/32 size. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay down thread. I've got something a little bit different here. This is my Vivis 100. And all I'm doing is making sure that that bead doesn't move. I'm tying in front and behind it. Okay, so that's good. Not going anywhere. Next, to connect the back and the front together, I'm using Orvis. This is super strong mono, and it's 25-pound test. Cut off about a 4-inch piece, just feeding it through and doubling it over. All right, make sure your dark part is on top. Tie it in from the side. I'm going to do a couple loose wraps. And as far as a distance, I want maybe 1/8 of an inch off the back here. That's it. So nice and tight. Go right back. There we go. Nice loop. I'm going to come right over front. And I'm going to leave about an eye's length in the front here. Double that mono back, tied in, and I'm going to come over it with super glue to hold everything tight and in position. So okay, next going to grab a little Zap-A-Gap. Come in and lay that down. Okay, next, this is a streamer brush. This is a 1/2 inch streamer brush, and basically I'm going to use it to create the profile that I want. In the smaller version of the M&M, I just basically use the Flashaboo Mirage, and in this case I'm just going to use the brush to create that profile. So do my best to keep the fibers up. Looks good. Wrap in front. Alright, that's good. I'm going to leave space at the front to tie material in. Clip this off. Always use the back end of your scissors. Alright, so grab my Velcro. I'm just going to hit it, trying to pull whatever fibers I can out. And ultimately what I want is the majority of the fibers, I want them to become the belly of this fly. I'm going to do what I can to move some of those fibers down. Keep them right there. I'm going to grab my Solaris. And you could do this with super glue too. It's just a little easier with Solaris because it gives you a little more time to mess with it. And this is bone dry. I'm just gonna pull those fibers down in position, hit it with the light. Okay, so now taking a look at the side, you can see how I've created a belly and a back. And for the belly itself, because this is going to be the shape, I'm going to come down at an angle and then pretty much leave the rest of that curve in there. Now we're going to cover this up with laser dub. That's the next step, but I am going to grab some Pantone markers. I've got 2 colors here. You can just do it with 1 if you want. I'm just going to hit it a little bit on the top. And that color, that's a pale yellow, and then this is just called a grayish olive. All I'm trying to do is add a little bit of contrast, right? Because we want the dark and the light. So that looks good. Next, I'm going to take Senio's Laser Dub Sculpin. I'm going to do some light, and I'm going to do a 50-50 mix here of both colors. I'm grabbing a pinch out there and do the exact similar amount with the pail. I'm going to blend them together. Calabatus ice dub. And I'm going to grab about the same amount. When you look at it side by side, you can see the colors match. So that's going to be the back. So I'm going to start by measuring and pulling my tips, as much of them as possible. I want the majority of them to go back 50% over that first section. So I want that to go there. The rest I'm going to fold under. So I've got it measured where I want it. I'm going to reverse tie, pull this back, and I'm going to do 3 loose wraps, pull it all to make sure it's up on top, cinch down tight. Okay, that looks good. Next, I'm going to use my laser dub in white plus my ice dub in UV pearl. And I'm going to grab a decent pinch there and add a little bit more. I'm trying to get the same volume top and bottom. And now I'm going to grab some of that ice dub in pearl. So that looks very similar. With this, I'm going to envelop the belly as much as I can. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do 3 loose wraps. Make sure that both colors are where they should be, top and bottom. I'm going to rotate just to double check, make sure they look good, and then I'm going to come tight. Okay. Come in with the zap. To about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Wrap. Hit it with the razor blade. I'm gonna grab Velcro. I'm going to pull everything back. And you can see that really nice minnow profile there. All right, that looks great. next thing, time for some trimming.
Okay, so to trim, I go through 2 different steps. First, I do one dry, and then next I do it wet. And basically what I've done is I've pulled the fibers out to the sides, and what you see is the general shape and taper, which is pretty good. And then I'll take my scissors and I'll create that minnow shape that I'm looking for. So I'm gonna go up at an angle. So you can see that taper there. And now I'll do the exact same thing coming across the bottom. Again, trying to create that taper. You can see that nice minnow shape. All right, now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to wet it and come back and we'll do some last minute trimming. So as you can see now, the fly itself is wet. And what I'm looking for is that general taper, right, of the fly itself. And all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna smooth things out. So I'm gonna go from the back up. And I'm gonna trim off just some of the high spots. Again, I'm keeping an angle so it goes up, looking like a minnow back and a minnow belly. And remember, you can always go back and trim more, but you can't put material on. So take your time as you're trimming. And I'm really happy with how that looks.
The last part of the trimming is with the belly and with the laser dub. And with the belly, I just don't want anything getting in the way of the hook, even though I don't think it would stop a fish from grabbing it. But I trim it, right, to give it the taper that I want as well. And then lastly, I take a look at the length of the laser dub, and I want it to go half the distance of the first shank. Sound familiar? And I'm using my anvil taper scissors here and just basically going through, trimming. If you haven't used them, they're amazing. They allow you to take material off, but not at all at the same time, which is really convenient, again, when you're trying to create a nice blended taper. So that's the Party Size M&M. One of my favorite flies to fish during low flows when the water is crystal clear and those fish are being uber finicky and picky. The 7 shanks come alive. This thing looks amazing in the water. So hope that helps you out. Please consider a like, following, subscribing. Check me out on Instagram.